Okay, now we're going to talk about tissues, or the tissue level of organization. Say it with me now. Atoms, molecules, cells, tissue, organ, system, organism. That's what we are. We are walking, talking organisms organized at the tissue level. Tissues are often referred to as the fabric of the anatomy and physiology. You think of your skin, your epithelium as a tissue. Your bone is still another tissue. Muscles, connective tissues of different types, nerves, adipose tissue. Groups of cells or tissues. They're structures with discrete structural and functional properties that get together and they form other things. Tissues are going to form organs, right? The next level up. So here we've got a group of cells in a ball. It looks like a blastula to me. That's what you'll know that particular structure called. To be called. Tissues are described as collections of specialized cells. Remember we talked about differentiation and specialization and cell products that perform a limited number of functions. So we know that epithelium, our skin, for instance, has a barrier function. It also will help us with our sweat mechanism to reduce our temperature. The skin performs a function within the immune system, protection. It also gives us our sensation happens within the skin. So a limited number of functions are going to be performed by a tissue. The study of tissues is histology, and we've been doing a lot of this in the lab. So now this is going to support your lab activities and really help you understand that information better. So the study of tissues is histology, and here you should know by now, having looked in your lab manual and looked within the microscope and on my video scope, that this is a type of epithelium here. This is stratified squamous epithelium. We've got your basement membrane that's going to connect to the underlying connective tissue. Looks like we've got a blood vessel here, maybe some smooth muscle over there, and all these tissues are going to combine and perform their function. There are 4 different tissue types. All right, they are connective tissue, which links things together, epithelial tissue like your skin, muscle tissue, which contracts, and then nervous tissue. So CT or connective tissue, epithelial, muscle, nervous tissue. Let's take a look at epithelial tissue. There are simple and there are stratified. So that's really simple. Basically, we've got one layer of cells in the case of simple cuboidal or simple squamous, or the fried egg cells there. And then we've got simple columnar, which is just a column shaped, almost like a rectangular shaped cell. And those are all simple. And then stratified squamous are going to be a bunch of stratified epithelium, rather, going to be a bunch of cells on top of one another, multiple layers thick. And this is what your skin looks like. Here's an image of connective tissue. Connective tissue is going to be comprised of fibers, matrix, and cells. So here are the fibers. We've got elastic fibers, or the thin purple ones, and the thicker ones are collagen. We've got cells within the connective tissue, and some of those are what are called fibroblasts, and fibroblasts are the factories. They make a lot of this stuff. They secrete the matrix to help the fibers grow. So connective tissue, and then there's muscular tissue. Here's an example of a skeletal muscle that attaches to a bone via what's called a tendon. In this case, your biceps tendon. Here's your beach muscle cut in half. This is what a muscle looks like on the inside. This is the cell, and a bunch of cells is going to group together and form a tissue. And there's even more organization within muscle cells. We'll cover them at a later date. But our second type of tissue is muscular tissue. And here's a nerve, nervous tissue. They kind of look like they've got projections coming out every which way. Once you see a nerve, you're not going to mistake it for anything else in the future. Same structures apply across epithelial, connective, and nerve tissues and muscle. We've got the cell body, we've got the cell membrane, we've got the nucleus in the center. That's that's where the genetic material is, right? Protein synthesis. Here's some further breakdown of epithelium or epithelial tissue. It covers things, all right? It'll cover your body's surface like the skin. Skin is the largest organ in your body. It's also going to line things like your stomach or your reproductive ducts or your intestines, your blood vessels. Things that have a tube. You'll oftentimes, your lungs, a good example is your alveoli within your lungs. And when it lines things, it protects them and provides means for absorption and gas exchange. And here are some examples within these different areas of the body. So within your trachea, we've got pseudostratified columnar epithelium that's got cilia on it. Remember when I talked about smokers, those cilia, they don't catch the dust from smoking, and then you can't hawk that loogie and spit it out. Instead, all that dust and smoke and soot stays in your lungs, you nasty stinking smokers. And then here's your esophagus here, and that's where food comes down. And so that's multiple layers thick. That's a stratified squamous epithelium, so that it can protect that area and basically transmit the food down into the stomach. And then cuboidal epithelium, I believe they're coming from your gallbladder, that is going to excrete things. It's a kind of a glandular epithelium, one cell thick. And here we've got your lungs, one cell thick within your alveoli. That's going to permit gas exchange into the bloodstream. And then in your gastrointestinal system, simple columnar epithelium, which performs a function down in that area, function of absorption. So you got to think about what the purpose is for each particular organ, and then you'll understand that why its tissue is created with a certain structure. So epithelial tissue is often going to be associated with glands. Epithelium is avascular, so it has no blood vessels within it. It depends upon diffusion, something a topic we just covered in our cellular level of organization studies. And that diffusion is going to be how nutrients get in and how things are absorbed into the cell. Glandular tissue, glandular epithelium is secretory in nature, so it's going to excrete things oftentimes from the epithelium. And here we've got this, looks like columnar or pseudostratified epithelium. It's got these white structures, and those are called goblet cells. They secrete mucus that's going to line your colon, let's say, your intestines in some way, so that your food can be broken down and transmitted. Mucus is slippery. It's going to send your food digested into the system, and then the waste is going to be excreted out your excretory system, your butt. Check out this structure here. I talked earlier about how this is stratified squamous epithelium. This happens to be of your scalp, 100 times magnification, and we've got this thing that is going to line the bottom, the very bottom of your of that layer of stratified squamous, and it's the basement membrane. And the basement, you think below, right? That's right. All these cells are perched upon, they sit upon the basement membrane. This is where they start growing, and this is where they end. So the newest cells are going to be close to the basement membrane, also known as the basal lamina, and it attaches your cells to the underlying connective tissue. Epithelium also provides protection. You look at the analogy here. We've got a brick wall. Each of these bricks or Legos, we used that analogy before, are kind of similar to stratified squamous epithelium. And the cells are going to be the bricks, and then the lipids or the connective tissue between those cells will be like the mortar that holds the bricks together. Epithelium is going to provide physical protection like that wall. It's going to control what can get through the wall, and we've got selectively permeable tissues. It's also going to transmit sensation. There's little sensors that are going to be within the epithelium that'll detect pressure and other things. And also there'll be certain secretions. For instance, within epithelium of your skin, you have a substance called sebaceous fluid. Your sebaceous glands will be in here, and they'll put a little oil out on the surface of your skin to keep it moist. Epithelium is going to specialize within itself. So we talked about its secretory components. It might have that mucus cell, the goblet cell within it that'll make for the slipperiness, or it might have the sebaceous fluid. It's also going to be key in transport. For instance, if this is your intestinal cell, this is your small intestine, it functions to absorb things. Right? So it's going to absorb water and nutrients from the food that you eat and drink into what's called the lumen, or this is the actual tube of the intestine, and this is where the food particles and stuff are going to be coming in. They get absorbed, so it transports across that epithelium. We're talking about the integrity of the physical integrity of this layer, this tissue layer here. It's protective. And here we've got the glycocalyx and sitting on top the microvilli, these little finger-like structures, and how these microvilli and the glycocalyx dramatically increase the surface area with their hills and valleys. Some epithelium has these adhesion molecules that attach them together. Well, some of them are called desmosomes. They're like little anchors that are going to hold cell to cell. Cell adhesion molecules are otherwise known as CAMs, and they're made of proteins. There are junctions, different types of junctions that are going to not only connect cells, but physically, but they're going to allow the transmission of stuff between the cells. And this is a good example of that is like your cardiac muscle, your heart muscle. They're specialized attachment sites for other cells or proteins. And there's three different types. There's tight junctions, gap junctions, and desmosomes. Read more about that in your text. There's germinative cells as part of your epithelium. I don't expect you to know too much about this other than cell divisions are going to occur here. And there's going to be a continual replacement of epithelial cells. Where are these germinative cells going to be located? Down by the basal lamina, the basement membrane. So this is the basement membrane as we saw in that previous image. All the cells are going to be on top of that. And this is the germinative layer. New cells to old cells old cells at the tip of the arrow. Different classifications of epithelium. Simple squamous. There's cube cells. There's column-shaped cells. And then there's multiple layers, and that's known as stratified, like we're looking in the side of the Grand Canyon here, right? There's different layers of rocks and sand and stuff that's been deposited. So that's called a strata. And so don't screw that one up. You should know multiple layers is going to be strata. It's more than one. That's the definition of multiple for our purposes, and greater than 3, of course, is what's going to be most common. Different layers of different shaped cells. As simple as that. Simple epithelium is going to cover the basement membrane. It's 1 cell thick. Examples of it are the simple squamous that this is. All right, this is what simple squamous looks at head on, looking straight at the top of the tissue. Versus if we're going to look at it from the side, we can see that this would be what it would look like in the case of a blood vessel, right? It's one cell thick, and this is the hole or the tube or the lumen of the blood vessel, and this tissue would wrap around just like that and make a tube. Also find simple squamous epithelium in your alveoli, your lung cells. And stratified epithelium's got several layers. This is going to be transitional epithelium. I want you to take a good look at this because the top layer of cells, or the apical cells, this is the basement member or the basal cells down here, and the very top cells that are going to be in touch with any of the contents, in this case of the bladder, are going to be called apical, and that's how a cell is identified by the apical cells. Note that this cell here, the apical cells, are dome-shaped, and they are called transitional epithelium. And this is very common in your genitourinary system, your bladder, your ureters. Those are the tubes that take the filtrate from your kidneys to your bladder. And what happens is this is going to stretch, so that domed configuration there is going to allow the cells to slide upon one another and stretch as a bladder might. Squamous epithelium is thin and flat, fried egg in appearance, one cell thick in the case of simple, stratified in the case, or multiple cells thick in the case of stratified. Cuboidal epithelium also often associated with ducts, glands. They look like they're hexagonal, or like they have six sides to them. Hex means six, like a hexagon. Like that. Boom, boom, boom. They kind of look like that. And they're often, these could be the kidney tubules. They're one cell thick, so they're simple, and they're cuboidal in shape roughly, so we're going to call them cuboidal, simple cuboidal epithelium. Columnar epithelium, this is a great example of simple columnar epithelium, because here we've got this straight column-shaped epithelium with the nucleus in the center. It's kind of oval in shape. Find simple columnar in your gastrointestinal system, your intestines. And glands, epithelial tissue is going to be found in glands. Here's some glands throughout your mouth. I don't know if you realize that, but you've got glands that produce different secretions that are going to be spilled out into your mouth to help digest food rather. Here's your parotid gland. It's very large out on your jaw, the edge of your jaw. The submandibular gland is under your mandible or your jawbone. We've got a sublingual under your tongue, and they have ducts that are going to come out from the glands and secrete different structures. Here's an example of different glands, different shapes of glands. Some are branched, some are curvy, some are they're all tubular. Basically, the definition of a gland is you've got a little place where the structures are deposited, the secretions are deposited, and you've got a hole down the middle. It's like a little spout like that, and stuff comes out. All right. Endocrine glands are part of your hormonal system. All right. Hormones are known as chemical messengers, so we've got hormonal glands that secrete hormones throughout the body, and they work together with the nervous system to create what's called the neuroendocrine system, and this is going to control so much within our body. Hormones are really, we think of hormones, as we're going to discuss later in the semester, towards the end in fact, you should find them very interesting, and they're very extremely applicable. They're active all the time, controlling the body and ensuring that we maintain homeostasis. So endocrine glands, endo again is within, and they're going to release secretions into the interstitial fluid. They're going to send their secretions into the blood vessels, most notably, so that they can be transmitted to the cells of the body. A good example of endocrine glands or epithelium that forms endocrine glands are simple cuboidal here, and this is a thyroid gland. That thyroid is right here up by your neck, and the thyroid hormone is going to control the metabolism of all your cells, so it's really, really key. And here's a gland within, looks like your pituitary. These glands have both an endocrine or hormonal and a nerve aspect to them. And the pituitary gland is a master gland that's up there, nestled in a bony aspect of your skull. And then here we've got the adrenal glands that sit on top, or the suprarenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And they do a lot of different things. Again, notice the epithelial structure here. Key is endocrine, associate them with hormones. Typically, the tissue trend is going to be simple cuboidal epithelium. This is how glands secrete their stuff. There are merocrine, apocrine, and holocrine glands. Okay, here are examples of them all. Remember that merocrine glands are going to secrete, here's an example of them here, they're going to secrete their little particles, their hormones, from the top of the cell. And in case of apocrine glands, the apical aspect of the cell actually breaks off, and this little vesicle is sent off into the bloodstream of the cell. And then holocrine, you'll think of whole, because it's going to produce a cell here, and that whole cell is going to be transformed into the secretion and spat out into the cell surface. I believe a sebaceous gland is like that, where it produces the cell, and then cell's going to go out onto the through the duct and be spilled out onto the surface of the skin. Most common secretory process within a gland is going to be merocrine, where secretions are going to form in these little vesicles within the cells, and again, particles are going to be heading out onto to perform whatever function. Cells remain intact. In the case of an apocrine, again, we've got the particles that are going to gradually head to the apical surface of the cell, which is inside this gland, and those particles break off and they kind of get spat out, do their thing. And then holocrine, here's an example. You see some cells in the process of mitosis here, reproducing so that they can continually, because cells are going to be high turnover of cells, because the entire cell is going to be disintegrated and sent out onto the surface of the cell. Whole cell is going to be. Exocrine glands. Okay, there are mucus cells in the case of goblets, and here's an example of them in simple columnar or pseudostratified columnar here, which I believe we've got going on here. Multiple nuclei sitting on top of one another, but distinct cells, not apparently distinct, but anyway, this is a goblet cell, and it's a unicellular. And then there's a case of multicellular gland, which is going to have a bunch of cells in this little pocket here, and it's going to secrete its contents like that. I said mucus cells or goblet cells are good examples of unicellular glands. Remember that. And we've got secretory cells, the goblet cells. Remember that they're distributed unevenly throughout the epithelium there. Every cell is not a goblet cell. Here's an example of a multicellular exocrine gland. Contains epithelium, which will secrete both, either endocrine or exocrine stuff. And that's our first lecture for tissue. I hope you enjoyed it. Pretty simple stuff, and again, overlap between lecture and lab. Have a good day. See you guys on Tuesday.